Okay. Hi, everybody. I am Samantha Spencer. For those of you who don't know me, I'm sure that most of you I've seen at various student gatherings, but welcome to our first night of senior research presentations. We have our children back here in the back that I know you know how hard they've worked throughout this entire process, and I also want to thank you for giving them the support that they needed to power through the bibliographies, to power through doing their own experiment, doing their math and all of that stuff. So thank you for helping them as well. Be proud of yourselves as much as you are proud of them. And they are here to show off this evening. They've been working on this since the beginning of the year, many of them since last year. And they're going to show you how they can combine information from the research class through their science classes and their statistical analyses and everything that they've learned throughout their time here at the Gov School. I do want to walk you through how the process is going to go if you haven't been to one of these before. So the students will come to the front when it is their turn to present, and they will tell you about their research project and what they did for theirs. When they are done, so when they get to the I will now take questions slide, the judges are each going to ask them one question, so please hold your applause until after they have finished the questions. Okay, so I know we all want to cheer as soon as they're done, but they're not done until they have made it through the judge questions as well. So please hold your applause until they have made it all the way through that. We then continue that process for each student. We will take a 10-minute break after the 5th student, who is Adam. So after Adam presents tonight, we will take a 10-minute break to use the bathroom, get some water. The bathrooms are just right here around the corner, and then there are some here in the back as well. So take a second, reset, and then when we come back, we have 4 more left after that. Once everybody's done, please continue to support them throughout the rest of their Gov School process. They're done with research after tonight, but please continue to support them as they go through all of the other processes. And I hope that we see you guys on the senior luncheon as well. A couple of suggestions, tips, requests. Please do not leave in the middle of a presentation unless it's an emergency. If you need to use the restroom or anything like that, please wait until we are in between presentations, and you can go out the back, you can go out the side, and then please don't come back in until we are in between presentations again, because it's going to distract the student if people are walking in and out. So please try to time those if at all possible. Please silence your cell phones. Please check and make sure that your cell phone is silenced. I'm going to check mine when I go back there, because it never fails that they still go off. So please make sure that your phone is silenced. We practice for all of the interruptions and distractions, but I'd still rather them not happen. Please also no flash photography or recording. My handy dandy iPad right there is recording it, and we will post it on the Gov School YouTube page after it's done and after it's processed. And then my final warning, if you have been here before or you know me at all, I will cry. I am a crier. If you think, oh, I know criers, multiply that by like 10, and that's what you're going to see, because this is my last year. Oh, look, it's already started. This is my last year at the Gov School. So, oh my goodness, I told them, I warned them. These are my last set of seniors. So I'm really proud of them, and I know you are really proud of them, and then to save me from crying, Haley's coming up to get us started.
And welcome to SRP Night. My study was on the effects of material construction on volleyball bounce. So a little bit about me. I go to Magna Vista High School. I plan on attending Mary Baldwin University to become a physical therapist. And their mascot is the Fighting Squirrels. And I don't know about y'all, but I've never seen a Fighting Squirrel before. So if y'all do, please let me know. The reason I chose this topic is just because it's very fun. All sports are fun, but volleyball is fun to me. I have a connection. I plan on playing volleyball at Mary Baldwin University, so I'm very able to connect to this topic very well. Volleyball is played worldwide. All around the world, you'll see it in many Olympic Games. You'll see many countries playing it, and anyone that is playing or wants to watch should know the rules so that they know what's going on as the game is played. So why should somebody play sports? So sports can help you mentally with like stress and anxiety. I play sports just to like not be in the world. I don't feel like I'm in the actual world and the world's not happening when I'm playing sports. Sports can also help you academically. There was a study done by Baker. They used 350 students, and half of them were student athletes, half of them were not student athletes. They were just regular students, and they gave them a math test, and they compared how well they done on that test to see which group would do better. And the results were that the student athletes done better just because student athletes have to keep a certain grade point average or GPA to be able to play. So some of the player aspects that can affect anything during the game, the height of the player can affect how high they can jump, how high they can get over the block, just to be able to hit the ball better or block better. Their jumping ability can also affect this, just because the higher that they can jump, the higher they can get up to be able to block the ball better or hit over the block. Their hand and arm coordination, the strength in their arm can also affect how well they play. There was a study done by Howard using 30 students, and it measured their shoulder strength and their forearm strength just to see which one would do better. And the results were that the forearm strength done better just because your shoulder is getting a lot more tension and a lot more stress through everyday life instead of your forearm. Also, vision can drastically change the way you see the court. You need to be able to find the holes and see where the players are at to be able to do well when playing volleyball. How the ball affects play? The ball, it bounces on different flooring. There's all different types of flooring. There's plastic, there's wood, there's concrete, tile. You'll play on all different floorings when you play volleyball, especially if you play like travel or school. Different schools have different floorings. The weight of the ball can also affect how well it bounces. There was a study done by Turcos, and they used two different volleyballs. They were the same brand. One was a lighter weight and one was a heavier weight, and they used 50 students, and they just wanted to see which ball the kids would interact with more, and the kids wanted to use the lighter weight ball better just because it didn't hurt their arms as it hit their arms. So the weight of the ball can affect how the students will interact with the ball. And the material of the ball, which is what my study was about, can also affect how the ball bounces. So the two brands I used was the Takahara and a Molten volleyball. The only main difference is the material on the outside of the volleyball. The Takahara is a synthetic leather volleyball and the Molten is a regular leather volleyball. This leads me to my research question was, does the material of a volleyball affect the bounce of the ball? So for my study, it was an observational study, and I was looking at the bounce height between the two different materials, and my stuff was Governor School vault. So I put 5 PSI in each volleyball, which is just the normal for a volleyball, and then I put tape on the wall at 6 feet. I used 6 feet just because most of the time that's how high a net would be, so it was just for real scenario. And I had a camera woman take the video so that I could go back later and look at my data to get my measurements. So I was looking at bounce height again, and I had 30 samples for each volleyball, and I had a video, as I said earlier. And so I would take the ball, start at 6 feet, and drop it, and then let it bounce once, and then pick it back up again and do this 30 times for each volleyball. So I had a total of 60 altogether. And then I put all my data into an Excel spreadsheet so that I could compare my data by putting it in a graph. So the null hypothesis, which is what I'm trying to disprove, is that the average bounce height between the Takahara and the Molten volleyball brand are equal. And then what I wanted to prove is that the average bounce height would be different between the two volleyball brands. So after I ran my test and I got my descriptive statistics, the Takahara volleyball had a sample mean of 3.52 feet and a standard deviation of 0.16 feet, and the molten volleyball had a sample mean of 3.94 feet and a standard deviation of 0.12 feet. And as you can tell by the graph, the molten volleyball done way better. It's the light purple color, and as you can tell, it had a better range between the heights. Even though the Takahara had a more frequency, the numbers are better for the molten volleyball ran instead of the Takahara. So I had a T-score after I ran my test, my 2 sample T-tests. I had a T-score of negative 11.73. This is very large and not close to 0 at all, so I expected for my p-value to also be low, and it was 2.06 times 10 to the negative 16th, which is pretty much 0. And then when I compared that to my alpha level, which was 0.05, it's way smaller than my alpha level, so this led me to reject my null hypothesis. So therefore, this leads me to the conclusion that there is significant evidence at the 0.05 level of significance to conclude that the average bounce height between the 2 volleyball brands are not equal. And this is important for the athletes, the coaches, or people who make the volleyballs, just so that they know which material on the outside will do better and will help the coaches when buying the products. Some of my limitations were that I only use volleyballs, so if I'd done a study again, I would use other sports balls. And then I had a small sample size. I only had 30 for each group, which that satisfied my condition, but if I was to do this again, I would get more samples. And then I could have had inaccurate measurements, just because I was going off of videos, so I couldn't get the exact measurement. So if I would have had a better tool to give me the exact measurement, my data might have been a little bit different. So for future research, look at different materials of volleyball. There's plastic, there's synthetic leather, and there's regular leather. There's other ones, but those are the main 3 that get used. And then look at other aspects instead of bounce. You can look at weight, you can look at the inside of the volleyball, you can look at other aspects rather than bounce. And then using other sports balls. They all bounce different, so using tennis balls, basketballs, any different sports ball other than volleyball, they all will bounce different. I want to say thank you to Ms. Samantha Spencer, Ms. Shannon Harrell, Piper Stember, and the judges and audience. Any questions?
Nicely done.
Thank you.
Haley. Taking your study into effect and the findings, how might that impact a coach or a player from an advantage standpoint on the team? In other words, does the knowledge of what you've gained have any impact on how the game's going to get played?
So if you know which court that you will be playing on when you go away or playing on your home court, you'll know which volleyballs will be better when you're practicing, so that you'll know which ones to use to better prepare your players.
Good stuff. All right, so I have like 2 questions, possibly 3. Before doing this project, did you have a preference for type of balls, / were you used to using one more than the other?
So when I played volleyball at school, we actually used a different brand volleyball just because it was cheaper than the other 2 that I used for my study.
Fair enough.
So I didn't really have a preference. It was just when I went to go look to buy these 2, they were the cheapest to buy for this study. So that's why I chose those 2.
Gotcha. Okay, so this is just kind of a philosophical question, I guess. Do you think there should be a standard used for all high schools or all colleges? As we can see, I mean, you kind of have an advantage over, the molten was the one that bounced the highest, right? So you kind of have an advantage there. Do you, if you were the czar over all things volleyball, would you make one a set standard that you have to use?
Yes, I would make the molten volleyball the standard, just because when you go away, they use different volleyballs that you're not used to. So if everybody uses the same, everybody can practice the same and be prepared.
Okay, you may have answered this, but did the different volleyball, I know there were different materials, but did you weigh them? Did they weigh a different amount? And if they did, do you think that would have had an effect in addition to them being different materials? Like if you had the same material and the same weight, do you think that would have changed the results any?
So both volleyballs they had 5 PSI in both of them, so that they were the same, so it was not a limitation. But if they were different, they probably would have bounced different, just because if they had less air, they would not have bounced as high as having more air than one another.
Got it. Thanks.
Hey, good job. I'm curious, at the beginning you mentioned, and I'm thinking about volleyball from like, men and women's division. Is that something that you could account for in your study as far as like actual play, differences in balance between a women's team playing versus a men's team playing?
So when you involve the player aspects, it's really hard to judge at the different aspects with bounce, just because different people have different strengths. So that's why I didn't look at the player aspects. I looked at the ball itself, just because it would have been the same throughout the study.
Great work. So my question is about the study itself. So I know you showed us the tape on the wall and you dropped and watched the video. As you were dropping the ball, did you have a way of measuring or controlling the amount of force used in that drop?
So I just started with the volleyballs in my hand and I just released them. I didn't put any force on them, just because that would make them bounce higher or hit the floor different, making it not as easy for the way that I done it.
Thank you, Haley.
Hi, my name is Reagan, and my study is on is it worse to kiss a human or a dog? So a little bit about me, I go to Magna Vista High School, and I plan to attend Old Dominion University in the fall to study marine biology. A little bit to why I chose this topic, health and hygiene of dogs is very important. I know we don't really think about it that much, but a dog can't brush its own teeth, that's kind of your hard job. And debunking the myths that dogs are disgusting, they're not that bad. And I just love animals. I have a dog myself, and she is my best friend. So to start this off, I wanted to give you a little bit of details on my research. Human saliva is 98% water with enzymes like liposomes, and it ranges with a pH level of 6.2 and 7.7. A study by Oligoy and al. Learned that it was a diagnostics tool. You can test for strep, COVID in a way, and flu. I know a lot of people get their mouths swabbed at the doctors whenever they go to see what they have. And it's also used to monitor anxiety. It maintains the mouth's pH and looks at how much enzymes you have in your pH to see how scattered they are, to see how bad your anxiety is, and that's how they monitor. For dog saliva, dogs are also 98% water with their saliva. They have enzymes the same way we do. We have antibodies while they have microorganisms that help fight bacteria. There's a lot of risks with dogs. A study by Beats and others found out that a woman got into a car accident, and when she got home, she let her dog lick her wounds. She now has no licks. They were amputated because the dogs had so much bacteria in their mouth, because they let them lick the wounds, that she's now wheelchair bound. It has a psychological effect. Dogs will get wet noses when they're happy, and they'll pant when they're hot, but also if you mix them two together, they are very happy with their owners. And just a precaution for dog owners, in the next slide I'll get more into zoonotic diseases, but staying away from those diseases can also be very important. Zoonotic diseases are a public health risk. There is many like rabies, norovirus, salmonella, brucella, and others like that. You get them from direct contact with an animal, airborne transmission, and bites. There's a major morbidity and mortality rate with these. A study by Martins and others found out that in India they had a 65% amount of dogs that had rabies that were not with their owners. So around India, they had many dogs that were homeless, didn't have an owner, but they all had rabies, which brought a lot of risk and mortality rates. More than 50% of people seeing these animals every day, but were luckily not bit. And transmission and prevention, taking your dog to the vet, keeping them away from animals that are roaming outside can be a very easy and effective way to keep them safe. So dogs and mental health, dogs are a companion. You hear man's best friend all the time when they're talking about dogs. They have a long history of loyalty and companionships for humans, but they also have an impact on depression. There was a study that found out that there is a long history with depression. 39.9% of people in this study were depressed. 17.7% of them had pets, and they found out that those living with pets had a 1.17 times higher percent to not have as many depressive symptoms or depressive mood swings as someone who did not have pets. There's a lot of social support and isolation that comes with that. Having a dog walk beside you in the parks can make you feel not as alone, and you'll get more attention from people. They're like, oh my God, that dog is so cute. So it helps them feel a little bit more happier inside. And service dogs are very important. I myself have an emotional support dog. She helps me when I am having anxiety attacks, and she's just all together a perfect dog. Which leads me to my research question. Do humans or dogs have more bacteria in their mouth? So for my method, I did dog owners and just humans in general. I did a survey/observational study. I did not have a control group for my study, which makes it observational. And I just did a saliva comparison. So for my samples, I got 30 humans and 30 dogs, and I chose petri dishes and stuff like that, which was provided by Gov School. And just looked at the different terms. For my volunteers, very sorry, Mr. Owens, I did your wife a little dirty in this picture, but it's okay. I got consent forms, and I did a randomly number 1 through 30, and I did a simple random sample to give these random numbers to the 30 humans and dogs, and I wrote a D or an H, depending on if it was a dog for D and human for H, and then I swabbed them. So after I swabbed, I did put them into a Ziploc bag and write the numbers on the bags before I transferred it into the petri dishes. After that, I put it in the incubator at 72 degrees Celsius, and this is what they look like. As you can see, the numbers and the letter are at the top, my initials, and the day that I conducted this. For my data collection, I had to wait at least 36 hours. I counted all of these. Took me a couple days because there's a lot. And I put them into Excel. And this is when I started to think about what kind of test I would be running. And I ran a 2-sample T because I was doing the mean between the two groups. So for my hypothesis, my null hypothesis is what I am trying to disprove. It is that dogs and human saliva counts are equal, as my alternate was that they are not equal. So analyzing my results, this is my graph, and the yellow is dogs and humans is pink. From looking at this, I didn't see a major difference other than the spike with my 17th dog that I did swab. It had a big spike. Their number was 623 colonies, as most of the others were below 400. My standard deviation for dogs was 78.4, which meant that there was at least 78 or more or lower of dogs' colonies counts, which led me to have a standard deviation of the difference betweens at 10.2. For humans, I had a 72.1, and my standard deviation for humans was 9.8. And for my results, my t-value is the difference in the means, which was 0.0012. And from looking at that, I knew that my p-value was going to be very high, and it was. It was 0.991, which led me to compare it to my confidence level, which left me with only a 5% chance of error, and it's way bigger. Which means I failed to reject the null hypothesis, which means that our saliva bacteria and dogs are very equal. So for this discussion, I had no significantly statistic difference, which meant that I couldn't disapprove that they were not equal in any way. And this just brings back to the health risks. When you're kissing your partners or kissing your loved ones, you're still getting bacteria. It's not just dogs. And just breaking the assumption that dogs are gross, they're not as bad as we think they are. Compared to other research, studies show that while dogs harbor more bacteria that can be harmful to humans, they also have a wide range of pathogenic bacteria, which helps them stay healthy in a way. Some hygiene habits that we have is, well, some people brush their teeth in the mornings or night and floss and stuff. Well, dogs can't floss or brush their teeth on their own. So we're a little bit cleaner in that way. I did have some limitations. I only had 60 samples, 30 humans and 30 dogs. I feel as though if I had more people or different people from different areas, it could be a different statistic count that I had. I did not identify specific bacterial species. Some bacterial species are healthy and keep you safe from bad bacteria, but I just counted bacteria as a whole. And potential habits, I may not have swabbed a dog all the way because maybe it was a little growly, so maybe I missed some bacteria in some dogs' mouths. What this can improve, it can clarify potential health risks with having dogs not have little play dates and stuff. Yes, you can get zoonotic diseases from other dogs, but if you know that they're okay, let your dogs play. The common belief on dogs is how they're dirty and stuff. They're not as dirty as we know. Bacteria load alone can be a scary thought to think about, but you have to also think about that they can be safe bacteria. And it has an impact on the world. We can bring more awareness to that. Dogs can be more seen in public and not just only service dogs. I just want to say thank you to my volunteers. I know y'all did not like me getting in your mouths. Yeah, I know it was bad. And just Piedmont Governor School teachers, Ms. Harrell for helping me with my statistics, Ms. Spencer for my research, and Ms. Dillon for getting me through the Petri dish. Any questions?
Great work, Reagan. So my question is about, you listed some of the zoonotic diseases that might have been included in those dog samples. What kind of diseases or bacteria might have been included in those human samples?
So for human samples, there was not many that I could really get into. In my studies, I learned more about streps and flus and how their bacteria looks in a Petri dish, but unfortunately I didn't look into more of the potential health risks of that.
Good to see you from 8th grade, right?
Hi.
Hope you've been doing good. I've actually got a question. Since this is something that I think everybody could benefit from hearing, what would be your next step? If you were to go on and do something more with this research from this step, how would you sort of get this information out to the average everyday dog owner who might need to hear it?
I think more so if I could bring more awareness to like SPCAs to let people know that bacteria in those dogs is not that bad. I know that's a potential health risk for having babies at homes and not knowing if you could have a dog in the house and stuff like that. I think that if I had a little brochure in SPCAs or little pet stores that sell dogs and stuff like that, it could bring more into their adoptions.
Did you think, like, I know that you probably had a pretty random assortment of dogs, but do you think that dog breed and size and whether or not they're indoor or outdoor dogs could have an effect on your results as you think?
I think it could be with age as well. Dogs can't really fight as much bacteria as they did when they were younger. So if I had a dog that was 6, 7, or 8, they might not be able to fight off bacteria as someone that I swabbed that was a year old as a dog. Bigger dog breeds have more bacteria that helps fight, just because they are known to try to be outdoors more. It just brings them to try to fight more. If they ate something they're not supposed to, as a dog that stays inside, they don't really experience as much diseases and bacteria as dogs outside.
All right, Reagan, forgive me if you already answered this, but how did you get your samples, and then what was your consent process?
My consent forms, it just let them know that there was some risks here, like their dogs could bite me and it could stop the whole process. I also let them know that they could gag from me swabbing. I went from left cheek to right cheek and swabbed just little circle rotations, and I put them straight into the Ziploc bags. So I just let them know that if they were a little more gaggy about things, to just be ready that I'm putting it in their mouth. I just kind of let them know it was more like a doctor's office visit. But that was the only risk that I had to look into was biting and gagging.
So Reagan, given all of the oral hygiene that we as humans practice, did it surprise you that the bacteria load in our mouths is really equitable to that of a dog?
No, Definitely. I actually swatted people around 12 a.m. at the park, the Jack Dalton Park. So I was like, oh, these people probably woke up around 8 or 9, brushed their teeth, so I'm not going to get that much bacteria. I did. My highest was 412 for humans. So it was kind of gross in my mind because I was like, ooh, dogs are going outside and playing in dirt, and you got this much bacteria? No, thank you. Thank you, guys. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alondra, and my question of interest is how does storage method affect apple freshness? A little bit about me. I attend Marsville High School. I plan to go to the University of Virginia, major in biology on our pre-PA track. The reason I chose this topic was one, because it was an easy topic to research and experiment, and because it's so widely consumed that this topic applied to many people. Apple weight, since it's so commonly used, people need to know the proper way to store an apple to create less waste. Since I want to find ways to prevent waste, I decided to first look at apple production and what people look for. I found that apples are produced globally with 77 million tons produced each year, leading to certain preferences. In fact, a study by Bowen and others tested 219 participants to see what their preferences was and found that 89% of them preferred more crispy and juicy apples rather than 11% of them preferred more acidic apples. This shows how strongly texture and juiciness impact consumer choice, and therefore people are more likely to spend more money on stuff they prefer. For example, students pay about $29 more to extra per week for healthier foods. Since they are paying more, they need to know why it's beneficial. Fruits and vegetables are essential for a healthy diet. They are low in fat and sugars, but are high in fibers and vitamins, and it helps prevent diseases. Apples provide vitamins A, B, and C, and contain polyphenols, which offer anti-diabetic and anti-cancerous properties. In one study by you and others, tested 476 apple samples to see how it impacted blood sugar. They found that blood glucose levels increased, and it boosted insulin, and it helped diabetes risk lower. Providing apples truly support long-term health. While apples offer numerous health benefits, there is quality and ripening processes are heavily influenced by a hormone called ethylene. Ethylene is a gas that helps trigger fruit ripening, and it changes the fruit color, texture, and flavor. And growers use tools to slow it and speed it up. In a study by Ali et al., researchers tested 3 types of tomatoes: cluster, heirloom, and cherry tomatoes, and exposing one group to ethylene and leaving the other untreated. They found that the ethylene-treated group helped the cherries ripen faster, while the other ones were unaffected. It helped change color, texture, and chemical makeup, confirming how powerful ethylene is in controlling ripening. Iodine is a tool to detect starch in apples, which helps determine how ripe the fruit is. In a study by Lowen and others, researchers placed iodine on different foods like potatoes, fruit, and candy. The iodine caused color changes when starch was present, indicating that it was good to test for ripeness. Growers use this method to decide when to harvest apples, aiming for the best flavor and texture. Storage temperature greatly affects how long apples stay fresh.
In cold storage, apples maintain their sweetness, crispiness, and firmness much longer. Studies show that fruits and vegetables at room temperature ripen and spoil faster. For example, oranges stored at 5 degrees Celsius last up to 90 days, while those kept at 26 last up to 20 to 46 days. In apples, heat can slow early softening and maintain acidity, but overall, cool temperatures are better for preserving quality during transportation and storage. Which leads me to my research question. How do different storage methods affect shelf life or freshness of apples? To begin, according to my research, I found that cool temperature storage tends to preserve an apple for a longer period of time, and this leads me to do an experimental study where I had a control group and I wanted to test the temperature effect on ripeness. I started off by gathering my materials. I decided to use 93 Fuji apples because according to my research, I found that Fuji apples are more crispy and sweeter, which more people tend to go for. I also will use gloves and pipettes to use iodine on my apples to test for starch. Lastly, I placed 31 different grouped apples into 3 different storage places. After gathering all my materials, I then took all 93 apples, numbered them, and used a calculator to randomly select 31 for each of the 3 groups. And then I washed my apples for about 10 seconds to remove the waxy layer companies tend to put on them to help preserve them. And then lastly, I placed 31 apples in my fridge, 31 on my dining room table, and 31 above my heater. I then stored them for about 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, I collected all my 93 apples and I cut them in half. Then used gloves and pipettes to drop an iodine on each apple and waited a minute for it to soak into the apple. After, I used the starch iodine shown to the far right to measure on a scale of 1 through 8 how much starch was present. Then a marker and a paper to write down my estimate where I ended up with a sample size of 31 apples per each group with a total of 93 apples. I began with my null hypothesis, which what I wanted to disprove. I thought that there would be no significant difference between the starch levels in all 3 storage groups. My alternative hypothesis was that the cold temperature group would have more starch level present than the heat and room temperature group. I found that there was a mean value of 3.9 for room temperature, meaning that that is the general level of my starch, and a standard deviation of 1.3, meaning that is the individual apples vary from the average. And then I had an average for my heat temperature of 2.2, a standard deviation of 1.1, and a cool temperature average of 5.1, and a standard deviation of 1.3. I ran a one-way ANOVA test due to me having three groups, and I wanted to see the difference between the groups were significantly different from each other. Where by using a one-way ANOVA test, I got an F statistic of 45.50, which is suggesting strong differences between the different groups. And then I got a p-value of 2.22 times 10 to the negative 14, which is the probability that the observed differences happen by random chance alone. Since this is way smaller than 0.05, this led me to reject the null hypothesis. In summary, at least one temperature group had a significantly different effect on shelf life. These findings match previous research that cold temperature was the previous best method for extending freshness. This information can help consumer companies store apples properly and help reduce waste and minimize financial losses. However, I did face some limitations. My first limitation was that I had a small sample size. I only tested 93 total apples. If I had more time, I would test a lot more apples. Another limitation I faced was that I only had one method to measure my ripeness. If I had more time and funding, I would use more than one measurement to measure the ripeness and use more advanced technology to help me. Future researchers should use different kinds of apples like Gala, Honeycrisp, or Golden Delicious to help give more accurate representation of apples, not just Fuji. They should also investigate different kinds of fruits and vegetables like mangoes, bananas, and potatoes to see how those react. Lastly, focus on specific temperatures like 0 degrees Celsius and 30 degrees Celsius to see how they react. I would like to give a huge thank you to Ms. King for helping me with my experiment, Ms. Spencer for helping me with my research, and Ms. Harrell for helping me with my math, and for the judges and audience for being here today. I would not take any questions.
Thank you, Alondra. You referenced this in your presentation about the variety of apples that you did not select. Do you think that your findings would transfer across regardless of what kind of variety, or are these exclusive just for Fuji apples?
Yes, I think that it would definitely affect like more than one type of apples, because apples, they're basically have the same type of like buildup, so it wouldn't really affect it. But because the only thing that would affect would be the size and stuff, and depending on where you store it.
Well, I have a similar-ish question, actually. I was gonna say, you use Fuji that had been processed through some company. It had the waxy coating on it. Do you think there would be any difference if you just went to an orchard yourself and picked them? Do you think there'd be any storage difference from them versus store-bought processed, so to speak, apples?
Yes, definitely. I think that since you go and pick them yourself, you wouldn't have the waxy layer, and then you wouldn't have to wait for the transportation to come, and therefore it being like fresher and being like less likely to go bad quicker, because you don't know how long they've been there at the store.
Okay, I don't know in your fridge if you put like things in the crisper drawer, but like my fridge has a crisper drawer, and I always wonder if it actually does anything. So like, does humidity or those kinds of things, you think that played a factor too, in addition to temperature, and whether or not you use the crisper drawer in your fridge?
Yes, definitely. I think that humidity does play a fact, especially in fridges. You can also control the humidity in fridges, but it also could play a role because it could ripen it faster, or like make it to the point where it like could get cold because the refrigerator depends. And then I have not tried the feature yet.
I actually had a question. I typically, like, whenever I've got apples, I've got them sitting on my kitchen table right now. In the future, where would you recommend I keep apples for myself? Like, where it makes the most sense to just kind of keep them hanging out for the best apple quality?
Yes, definitely. I think that according to all my like research and my experiment, I feel like the best method would be storing them in your refrigerator, but not alongside any other fruits because of the ethylene. It would help, like it would make them more ripe because of the ethylene production from the other fruits.
So my question is about what recommendations would you maybe make to, I don't know, grocery stores or schools, cafeterias, places like that that store like apples in bulk? Is there a better way to keep them fresh and produce less waste?
I would probably tell them to not put them near like any other fruits like bananas, because bananas also like take out the ethylene gas that I mentioned before, and maybe not store them in the bag because that could cause humidity.
Next up we have Ella.
Good evening, my name is Ella Cook, and for my study, I wanted to see whether organic or inorganic mulching was better for growing plants. So a little bit about me is I'm a senior at Magna Vista High School. I plan to take the phlebotomy at Patrick and Henry this fall, and I aspire to be a nephrologist. So why did I choose this topic? I chose this topic because with the amount of additives and preservatives being on our foods, I want to do something that would be healthy. Also, convenient timing. I had to sadly change my topic middle of the semester, so I wanted something that wouldn't be very hard. And then simple execution. I wanted something that would be simple and easy to do. So for water factors, during the last decades, 30 to 40% of the Western United States was under prolonged drought conditions, while from 1999 to 2010, the combination of droughts and heat waves happened more frequently and lasted longer across the country. Next is overpopulation. Excessive groundwater is being consumed by phenomenal agricultural needs to feed the rising population, which in turn is leading to the depletion of groundwater resources. Next is plant health. Although plants get water, this does not mean that the water they get is good for them. So, a study by McEwen and others found that the quality of irrigation water influenced plant health with saline or polluted water, which in turn affected their growth rate and reduced nutrient absorption. So garden and lawn. Not only do plants give off a nice aura, sense of beauty, and they have important roles in one's personal life, but they also can contribute to the community and the way you feel about your house and stuff like that. So next is dry conditions. Mulch treatments help retain soil moisture, in turn enhances plant resilience to stress caused by dry conditions, and LED wavelengths. A study by Darko and others found that red and blue LED wavelengths help affect the metabolism of plants, which enhances their growth. And next is inorganic mulching. Inorganic mulching is low maintenance because not much is required and it does not decompose. Some examples are gravel, rubble, and scoria, which is also known as volcanic rock. A study by Dew and others stated in an article that sand mulching prevents water and wind erosion, reduces salt accumulation at or near the soil surface, extends the growing season, and improves moisture by promoting better water infiltration and reducing evaporation from soil surface compared to bare soil. Next is temperature. They and others found in the study that inorganic mulching significantly enhances the hydrothermal environment by improving soil temperature and moisture retention, which helps optimize conditions for crop growth, particularly during winter and in very cold climates. Next was organic mulching. Organic mulching is a natural way to provide nutrients to plants. Wang and others specify organic mulching things such as crop residues, wood, paper, and animal byproducts applied on the soil surface to improve the conservation of both soil and water. Next is moist soil. As organic mulch breaks down, it gives nutrients to the soil and the water and everything. It can help it in all those ways, especially in harsh conditions where it's dry and they don't get much water. Organic mulching is a great help in the farming aspect of how dry it can be in certain climates. And in a study done by Shazad and others, they conducted a study where researchers looked at natural minerals such as farm manure on wheat straw and wheat crops. They found that farm manure was especially helpful because once it decomposed, it gave nutrients to the soil and the plant itself. Overall, the study found that using organic mulching can help lead to smooth soil, holds in nutrients, and leads to better harvests. Which leads me to my research question: does mulch type affect plant growth? So for my method, I use cilantro because cilantro is widely used by people all over the country for foods and just because they like to eat it sometimes. Also observational. I didn't have a control group. I had 50 plants, 25 got inorganic mulch and 25 got organic mulch. And I wanted to see which one would cause the plant to grow more over the course of time. So for my supplies, I had mulch, I had an organic coconut brick, and for my inorganic mulch, I had red rock. Also, I used cilantro seeds. I used my home supply of water. I used 3 fluid-ounce bath cups to make sure my plants germinated in, and once they grew, I transferred them to bigger potting plants. I also used a ruler to measure how much my plants grew. So for my data collection, I measured my planting. I measured my plants just how much they grew to see which plant was better, or which mulch was better, I'm sorry. And I used my mulch. Like I said, I used the organic coconut brick and I used red rock. I made sure my plants germinated. It took them about 10 days to germinate, and then I transferred them to bigger potting plants. And for my mulch, I shaved off some of the organic coconut brick, and then I covered that on top of it. And then for my organic, I used rock, so I didn't want to make sure that they blocked the plant growing. And then for watering, I did not exactly measure how much water the plants got, but I gave them water every once in a while so they did not dry out, and I didn't want them to have too much water because that would have tarnished them as well. Also measuring, I measured my plants every 2 to 3 days to see how much they were growing.
Also, for my hypothesis, my null hypothesis, which is what is widely pretty much predicted by the overall population, or what I'm trying to disprove. And according to my research, I hypothesized that organic mulch would be better for growing plants because it's all natural and it decomposes. For my mean, for my organic group, I got 19.2 inches and a standard deviation of negative 3.23. Mean also refers to the typical average of the plant, and the standard deviation is the average amount of variability in my data set. So for my organic group, I got 16.68 inches and a standard deviation of 2.53 inches. So for my results, I had a 2-sample t-test, so I had a t-value of 3.160. My measurement of my sample, which what the t-value is a measurement of how much my sample mean differs from what I originally hypothesized from the population, which was how far away it is from it being equal. Also, my p-value, I got 0.001. The p-value is the number of how strongly my data goes against the null hypothesis, also being how likely it would be to obtain the same results if the null hypothesis of them being equal were to be true. Also, I had to compare that to my alpha level of 0.05, which is the value number determining whether my result is statistically significant or not, with my p-value being extremely low, also very far from the alpha level of 0.05, I rejected the null hypothesis, meaning that them being equal was not true. So for my conclusion, I came to the conclusion that organic mulch is better for growing plants, 1, because of my lit review, and 2, because of the study I conducted. Once the mulch decomposed, it also gave nutrients to the plant. Someone that will face similar scenarios as I did in my study will be people who live in dry climates because they're needing to give their plants mulch because they're not retaining as much water. And also the importance of this is people who live in dry climates. With overpopulation and the over water consumption, we are needing to use as little water as possible. So mulching is a very big thing to do, which can help everyone all around. So for my limitations and corrections, I did not have efficient time. I would say I should have started earlier. I did have to change my topic middle of semester. That was kind of sad. Also sample size. I only had 25 of each with each mulch, so I did not have the efficient sample size that I needed. Me starting earlier would have also led to me having more in my group to test. And also not enough space. I did grow these plants in my room on a shelf, so if I would have had a greenhouse or something, I would have had more space to grow these plants. And for future research, I would like to see other researchers try this exact study with non-vascular plants, just because non-vascular plants do grow in more moist climates with more water. So I'd like to see how little mulch you could use with these plants. Also dry climates. I would like to see these used in dry climates just because they don't have enough water there, so I would like to see how that affects it. And I would like to give a thank you to the audience and judges, Lowe's Home Improvement, because that's where I get some of my supplies, Ms. Shannon here for helping me with my math, Ms. Samantha Spencer for helping me with this whole thing, because having to switch a topic middle of semester and catch up on 20 bibliographies was not fun. And Patrick Henry Community College for giving me the opportunities to complete this project. I will now take questions.
Great work, Ella. So my question for you, we know for a lot of things organic is better. Why is there a market for inorganic mulch?
Because it decomposes, so it's all natural. Once it decomposes, it gives nutrients to the soil and the plant itself. As where inorganic mulch, it does not decompose. It's typically rock and gravel. It's just there to give it nutrients. It doesn't do anything more than that.
Thank you. I'm actually curious, you've piqued my interest several times here. Sometimes we learn more from the things that don't quite go as well than we do from things that came easily. I'm curious the research that you had to like abandon from the beginning and then starting back over. What did you learn from that process of sort of having to readjust and, kind of scramble to get it done a little bit?
I honestly don't think I could have done it without Miss Spencer because I had to switch literally middle of the semester. I was working with Eastman Chemical Company, but that didn't turn out well. So what I learned from it is just how to make the best of every situation and how to use your time efficiently, because I had to catch up on 20 bibliographies in way less amount of time than everybody else did. So I learned how to manage my time and other classwork a little bit better.
Do you think your results would have been any different if you had started with plants that are already grown instead of from seeds? So you get a Lowe's and buy the plants that are already grown to a certain size.
I do think they will, particularly just because of the amount of nutrients that they get. I think anything given more nutrients would do better. I honestly would like to try that though. Like, especially if you're having like a fruit that you're growing, you can get bigger fruits from using organic mulch.
Ellie, you're kind of leading into what I was getting ready to ask. If you were doing this over again, would you stick with a food or like an herb like cilantro, or would you go with like flour, or would you go with like fruit?
Well, with overpopulation and the talk about climate change, I would like to go with trees because I've seen the part with herbs and fruit, stuff like that. I would like to grow with trees to see if trees would do better in dry climates to see if we can grow more.
Well, obviously, you're wanting to control as many variables as you can, and you mentioned about the watering. You gave it some water. What steps did you ensure that you were giving equal amounts of water to all the plants?
I measured out how much mulch was given to each plant. Like I said, it was a coconut brick, so I just made sure to get off enough for each one to cover the top of each one. I measured out organic how much each got, and then I counted out from our inorganic rock how much each got to where it wasn't covering the top of it to tarnish its growing.
And next up we have Ella.
Hello, my name is Adam Aguilar Jr., and my project is on the sound obstruction of oak versus poplar. So first, a little bit about me. I plan to go to Longwood University and major in math, but currently I'm enrolled at Martinsville High School. I chose this topic because it has to do with common materials. Everyone knows about wood, specifically oak and poplar are two very common woods, so hopefully a lot of people would be able to gain information from my study. I don't know about you guys, but all the time I'll be at home doing homework or on a phone call and I'll hear a car drive down the road or a plane pass by overhead and it will totally derail my train of thought. Or if you have a teenage brother, like mine, you'll hear them screaming through the wall at their video game at 4 a.m. So hopefully by studying sound obstructing materials, we can alleviate some of these occurrences and save us all some sleep in the process. In the beginning of my project, I did some research. Noise pollution is a very common problem that can stem from anywhere, whether it be the car or the plane that we talked about, or a construction zone outside, or just a loud group of people. Noise pollution can have negative impacts on wildlife. For example, birds have been found to have chronically high levels of stress when exposed to noise pollution for long amounts of time, and it can also cause them to miss necessary cues in their everyday life, like a predator attack or hearing prey on the floor. It can also have a negative impact on humans. It can lead to disorders like depression and anxiety if happening for a long amount of time. And it has also been shown to have a negative impact on student learning. For example, in a study by Kizar et al., they studied 120 classrooms in Basra City, Iraq, and found that the mean amount of sound in each classroom was higher than standards set by the World Health Organization. But luckily, sound absorbing materials can help to alleviate noise pollution. There are two main types of sound absorbing materials, the first being porous and the second being resonant. Porous absorbing materials work by using pores or ridges on their surface for the sound to bump into and then reflect into each other, dissipating into heat and effectively nullifying it. Resonant sound absorbing materials work in a very similar way, but instead they have an air-filled cavity behind the material for the sound to reflect in, then again into each other, dissipating into heat. There are a couple of different ways to test how well something can absorb sound, two of which are an impedance tube method and a reverberation. For example, in a study by Zhang et al., they used a reverberation room to test how different perforations in birch affected its sound absorption properties. They found that perforations in birch led it to absorb sound more efficiently than non-perforated birch. Sound level meters are a way to test how much sound is in an area rather than how well something can absorb it. There are three main types of sound level meters. One is type 1, the second is type 2, and the third is type 0. Type 1 sound level meters must be accurate within 1 decibel, Type 2 sound level meters must be accurate within 2 decibels, and type 0 sound level meters must be extremely accurate and are mostly used in high precision labs. Sound level meter applications are an alternative to sound level meters, and they are apps on your phone that aim to do the exact same thing as a sound level meter, but by using the phone's microphone. They are much cheaper and more readily available, so they are a common alternative for the everyday person. In a study by Boronsky et al., they tested the efficiency of sound level meters compared to sound level meter applications, and they found that sound level meter applications do not meet the qualifications to be called a sound level meter, but can instead be called a sound level indicator and used for general testing in everyday life. Another thing that we use in everyday life very commonly is wood. It's used from everything to the table you're sitting behind, to the floors in our homes and the walls that make them. Altering wood can lead it to absorb or obstruct sound better. For example, with Jang et al., the perforations in birch lead it to absorb more sound. It can also have different chemical treatments that affect how much it reflects it. Oak is much harder and denser in general, and poplar, although still classified as a hardwood, is softer and more porous. Harder and denser materials have been found to reflect more sound than they absorb, but the softer poplar and more porous have been found to absorb more sound than it reflects. This led me to my research question: do oak and poplar block the same amount of sound? So I believed that they would not block the same amount of sound because of the different characteristics of wood, many of which can affect how well it absorbs sound or reflecting them, like hardness, density, and weight, and even elasticity. My study was observational because I was only comparing oak and poplar to each other rather than also to a control group. Before I could do my study, I had to prepare it. I had to cut and glue the wood, which you can see a picture of me cutting it using a chop saw on the left, and then you can see the finished wood on the top right with oak on the left and poplar on the right. I also had to cut the styrofoam box that I would be performing my study in, which you can see a finished picture of on the bottom right. During my actual study, you can see a picture of me performing it there. I had a sound level meter on one side of the box, and then I also had a sound source on the other side of the box. The sound level meter would tell me how much sound it heard after traveling through either oak or poplar, whichever I was testing at the time, and the sound source was a Bluetooth speaker that I was able to play without opening the box. I tested each wood 31 times. I also used a random number generator to pick which type of wood I was testing for each trial, and this would help just to alleviate human bias, and also if anything had happened to the box during the study, it would be the same across the board. My null hypothesis was that the average amount of sound heard after traveling through oak would be the same as the average amount of sound heard after traveling through poplar. This is the hypothesis that I am trying to reject and that I do not believe. The alternative hypothesis was that the average amount of sound heard after traveling through oak would be less than the average amount of sound heard after traveling through poplar. This means that oak would have performed better and blocked more sound than poplar. This is the hypothesis that I am trying to prove. This is a graph of my raw data. You can see oak on the left in the green and poplar on the right in the purple. They had absolutely no overlap, with oak performing better at reflecting sound and keeping it in than poplar did in every single trial. I ran a 2-sample t-test because I had 2 groups without a control variable that I was comparing. The average amount of sound heard after traveling through oak was about 106 decibels. The average amount of sound after traveling through poplar was about 109 decibels. And after running the test, I got a p-value of 0, which is just the percent chance that what I found was coincidence. And this was less than my alpha level of 1%, which is the percent chance of error that we believe to be acceptable. So I was able to reject my null hypothesis. Rougher and heavier materials have been found to reflect more sound than they absorb, and so I believe that my study aligns well with previous studies because oak is rougher and heavier than poplar. So I think that although it may not have absorbed more, it was able to obstruct it more efficiently. This is useful in everyday life because we can use things that we are already using, like these tables, if they're no longer needed, and recycle them into more efficient objects for different purposes. My study was not perfect. The materials that I used could have been much better. For example, I used a type 2 sound level meter, which has to be accurate within 2 decibels, like I mentioned before. So I could have used, hypothetically, a type 0, which would have given me more accurate results. The location that I performed my study in was also not the most soundproof. I did it in a detached garage in my backyard made out of metal. So there is a chance that outside of sound could have influenced my study. I also had a small sample size. I only tested one piece of oak and one piece of poplar, so there is a chance that what I found is coincidental based on those specific pieces. So future research could test more pieces so that I could get a more accurate result rather than leaving coincidence. Noise pollution can affect wildlife and humans just the same, so it is important to try and find sound obstructing materials to alleviate. Future research could try different variations of wood, like the Birch and James study, and it could also try different chemical treatments to see what the best combination is for absorbing sound. And it could also try different areas to do it in, because a forest with multiple sounds going on may have different effects on the wood than in an enclosed environment. Hopefully, we can find a more convenient solution to noise pollution rather than having to make completely new objects to cure it. If we can have something that is decoration on the wall made out of wood, if it could have perforations and bridges or a soundproof cavity behind it, then it could serve two purposes at once. I would like to thank my teachers, Ms. Samantha Spencer, for helping with the research and to oversee my project, Ms. Jenny Whitaker and Shannon Harrell for helping with the math, and then I would like to thank my family and friends, specifically my father, Adam Aguilar, for providing me with the styrofoam box I use, and my robotics head mentor, Trevor Martin, for allowing me to use the chop saw to cut through it. And then I would also like to thank you guys, the judges and audience, for coming to witness everything that I've worked on for the past year. Questions?
Really nice job, Adam. Did I understand you did a p-value of 0.01?
I had a p-value of 0.
Right. So when you started, what were you intending? What did you think the p-value was going to be? Because that's incredibly low for education.
Right. I believed that the p-value was going to be much higher than it was, because although my findings of raw data were not the exact same, they were very close. 109 decibels and 106 decibels are not that far off.
Sure.
So I thought that I was not going to be able to reject my null hypothesis. But in reality, because they didn't overlap at all, it was that there was no chance of coincidence, and I was able to reject it quite confidently.
Very nice. Congratulations on your noise scholarship.
Thank you.
All right, Adam, I have a very intense question. What are some of the sounds you used?
Thank you, Dr. Mayhew. I only used one sound so that it would be the exact same across the board. It might be better for future researchers to try multiple sounds but different frequencies to see how it would affect the wood. But for the sake of my study and it being the exact same, I only used one sound, which was a loud beep.
Where did you get the inspiration for the box and the divider? Because that was really clever. I was reading your description of your project earlier today, and I was like, how does styrofoam box piece of wood? How is it gonna? And when I saw it up there, I was like, oh, that's clever. So did you get inspiration from anywhere, or is that just off the top of your head, or?
So when I first thought about my study, I was trying to think of different ways that would be the most efficient for doing it. And I was trying to think of what materials would be easiest to create a box like that. I thought that having the microphone and then the thing that was playing sound on one side would be the easiest and most efficient way to test it. And styrofoam was just a quick choice that I made that I thought I could easily manipulate to fit the shape that I needed. And I thought that having it so that I could slide the oak and poplar in and out would be much easier for repeated trials, so that I wouldn't have to have two boxes completely separately. I could swap them every time.
Excellent. Congratulations on choosing math, by the way.
You're not biased at all, are you, Mr. Bellis?
Not at all.
Very nice work. I'm curious about the changes that you might see coming to new construction projects. So is that something you can elaborate on a little bit? What changes do you see maybe future construction projects making, especially in buildings or businesses that would really benefit from noise reduction and sort of canceling out some of those outside sounds or even inside sounds that maybe you would want to keep inside the building and not polluting the outside world.
Right, thank you, Mr. Owens. So I think that if we had more future research to show the efficiency of different woods, construction could better choose wood type for suiting what type of building or what type of room is needed. For example, if there's a musician who's making their home, they will probably want a more soundproof room. So rather than just having soundproofing pads on the inside, the walls of that specific room also have a specific wood that would do better. And for construction zones, for everyday homes, it might not affect it much because I don't think that for the price, most would change what type of wood they're using. You could change the type of wood if it would be the same for the price, but I think that people in construction would have to compare how much it costs to its efficiency and everything down to even how endangered the type of tree might be. If a tree is better acoustically, it may not be worth it to use that in construction if there are not many of them left.
Cost-benefit analysis, right?
So you mentioned one of your limitations was your location, and that might have created some differences. If you were to replicate this and you got to pick your ideal location for your study, where would it be?
I would go to a musical room, like I mentioned. If someone had a room in their house that would be completely soundproof, I think that that would be the best case scenario. Outside sounds like the car and plane that I mentioned at my home could have affected the study. So if I were in a soundproof room like that, then there would be absolutely no outside sounds that could be taken into account. Another thing that could have affected the study is the sounds that I made while I was testing it. If I had a more soundproof material for the box that I wouldn't have to easily